Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Oh, Miles here.
Your Owl Post for the week is freshly delivered, and I am just one of the hosts here, Matthew Rushing. And with me, as she is every single week, the wonderful, magnificent, and fantastic Andrea Coffman.
Fantastic beast. I feel like a beast today.
Well,
Probably not in a good way. But I did shower, so at least I don't smell like a beast.
And where to find them? Right there. Right there.
Right here. Every week. You can find us. Or me.
Well, I guess it's better than being a, boring beast. A fantastic
I was going to say it's better than being an
beast,
unfantastic beast.
Nothing worse than being unfantastic. I don't know what that's like. So.
At least if I'm a beast, I can be fantastic.
Exactly. Anyway, well, we're definitely excited to be back. We're going to be in Chapter 10, Kreacher's Tale. But before we get to that, Dre, I didn't know if you knew this, but we got a brand new review on Apple Podcasts.
I was so excited.
Yay! It says, love it! It's from Endrine, I think is how you would say that. It's an interesting spelling. So, and they said, best Harry Potter podcast. I've tried all of the ones I could find and couldn't find any better than this. Keep it up, guys.
Woo, woo.
Man, best Harry Potter podcast. Goodness, that's some high praise.
Sure is. I'll take it, though.
Yeah, me too, especially today. I really appreciate that, though, and I know Drea does. It means a lot to us that you guys would give us those reviews and let us know what you think of the show and help other people find it. You can do that wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure you got Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the other places. Make sure you're subscribed, too, so you get the show as soon as it drops. You can also find us on Twitter at Join Nerd Party. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/The Nerd Party. We're on Instagram at The Nerd Party. And then we've got thenerdparty.com where you can find all the shows we're doing. And you can even send Dre and I an email through the contact section.
We did have a really interesting question posed to us on Instagram in the last week or so. They wanted to know that if we had to recast Harry in the movies with kind of who we know of in the world now, who do we think could do a good job with that?
Oof.
I know. That's a lofty question.
Yeah.
Like, who else besides Daniel Radcliffe? And I'm going to take some liberties with this because I've been watching a lot of Hamilton. And I think that John Boyega would do an amazing job as a Harry. I mean, he wouldn't fit what you think of the description of him from the book, but I still think he could do. He's got the kind of awkward, natural leader, humble thing, super down. And I think that I would love to see that. That's what I would do if I could.
Yeah, it's really difficult because, and part of it is the whole, I don't know tons of child actors right now, and when you're thinking about Harry, you've got to start with a child actor.
True. And,
so I have a really hard time. And two, you have to start with a British child actor.
Yeah. And Daniel Radcliffe did an amazing job as Harry.
Yeah,
so
he really did.
I also don't have a real strong desire to replace him either. So
it's tough. It's really tough. I saw that question and I've kind of been thinking about it. We're in the middle of a move, so I haven't been able to think of much else, honestly. But it is a really difficult question to try and think of recasting Harry. I don't think it couldn't not be done, but one of the things you mentioned, Dre, is that, Daniel Radcliffe really did a great job, I think, of portraying Harry's kind of very dry, sarcastic nature that he can have, and he did it really well. He's also a good straight man, which Harry is in the books too, or a lot of it. So really, really difficult to try and think of who could replace him. So I unfortunately do not have any answer to that question right now. But it is a fun one, and I think it would be kind of cool if other people maybe got into this that listen and let us know what they think. So hit us up on the social medias with the hashtag #OwlPost, and so we can see what you think.
Especially any of you out there who watch a lot of like BBC with the super BBC British actors and who are usually a little less well known than some others. And I mean, there's got to be someone out there.
There's got to be.
There's got to be some great options. But yeah, I mean, it's a thought-provoking question. Maybe better posed when Matt is not highly distracted by the world around him.
Drea can attest to that my office looks very different right now than it normally does. It's very empty for the most part. So this chapter is so interesting, too, because, the kids have had a long night. They are at Grimmauld Place. Harry wakes up before anybody, and I really love that, he notices that, Hermione and Ron are sleeping quite close together, and it looks as though they kind of fell asleep holding hands, and it makes Harry feel very lonely, and that kind of immediately kind of has him turn to his thoughts about Dumbledore and the Horcruxes and this whole thing that he's going to be a part of and doing, and then just thinking about all of the stuff he learned about with the other night with Godric's Hollow, and was Dumbledore more like Dudley than he thought, and it's really being put into perspective in his mind just how much everything affected him that he heard at the wedding, and it's difficult for him, and so I kind of liked that Harry realizes kind of stewing in these thoughts is not good for him. And so he goes exploring the house, and, he ends up finding Sirius's room and exploring around Sirius's room to try and just get his mind on something else.
So the first time I ever read this book, I was in college. It was like my last year of my undergrad. And I remember this was a book I wouldn't put down. I think I got it at like 10 o'clock at night, and I just read it straight until like 6 a.m. the next morning or something crazy like that. I don't remember. Some crazy timeline like that, but I wouldn't put it down. And I remember it was super early in the morning, just like in the book. And I remember reading the part where Harry acknowledges that essentially Ron and Hermione fell asleep holding hands. And I just remember sitting on the couch of my apartment with my roommates dead asleep and bawling my eyes out because I was so moved by that moment. And I could totally relate to Harry in that moment. And that feeling has stuck with me for 12 years. And that I've been waiting for that moment in the book since I read it the first time. And it's so powerful. And I am constantly in awe of how much you can be moved by reading kind of a single passage, and it sticks with you for a very long time. So the first page of this chapter has such a deep meaning in my heart, and how Harry Potter really has been a part of my life. And so I was really excited to get to it, and have a very different response to it than I did when I was, I don't know, what was that? 12 years ago, so 22. So, I think it's phenomenal. And I do think this is one of the more emotional chapters we've had in a long time. And not from oh my gosh, somebody died or there's something life altering happening, but this time we spent a few pages, of this chapter processing everything that's happened since kind of the start of the end, right? And I love that he kind of just wanders off and starts looking around and finds such deep information in this house that's been apparently ransacked by we don't know who. But I love that he finally kind of gets up the courage to go into Sirius's room and find something so deep and meaningful in there.
Yeah, I honestly had kind of forgotten about this chapter. And, what he finds is, he's looking around Sirius's room. Sirius is very good at sticking it to his parents by sticking things all over his walls with permanent sticking charms, that have to do with everything that his parents would hate, such as like Gryffindor and all of
and
these
Muggles.
Yeah, Muggle related things. In fact, he even has a picture on his wall that is a Muggle picture of him and his friends, which they don't move. It's a very blatant, standout. And you gotta love that, that Sirius is just so, ballsy, honestly, to do that in his parents' house. And it's a picture of Sirius and his best friends, So it's, you've got Sirius there with James and Lupin and Peter. And, it's also...
is it terrible that I would totally do the same thing, though?
Yeah.
Not even just as a kid. I would still do the same thing.
I don't know if you would also have pictures of bikini-clad Muggle girls, but Sirius has that too.
There's some men out there that would look real sexy in a bikini.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true.
But I would totally still put things up on the wall that would, stick it to whoever, like, that are very boldly who I am. Like, I would totally still do that. So this Sirius's decorating style, like, speaks to me. So it doesn't wear off over time, parents. I'm just kidding.
That's true. And he ends up finding an old copy of The History of Magic by Bathilda Bagshot, who we've heard of before, last chapter again. And then what he finds is a letter that is written by Lily to Sirius, and she's thanking him. It's a thank you note. To thank him for the wonderful gift that they got Harry for his first birthday. It's a mini broomstick that Harry apparently has been riding around all over the house, so proud of himself, so excited, loves it. There's even a picture that he finds of himself, of this, tiny little boy riding around on this broomstick. And she talks about, the birthday party being very low-key, and Bathilda, who obviously lives in Godric's Hollow, had come over, and in fact, she comes over almost every day. She dotes on Harry, she's basically like Aunt Bathilda, which is really cool. She mentions that Dumbledore still has the invisibility cloak, so James can't really leave the house. And
which, by the way, confirms something that happened in the very first book, when Harry gets a mysterious Christmas present of the invisibility cloak. That came from Dumbledore.
Yep.
We're going all the way back to the beginning, man. We're like only a few chapters into the first book, and we're like all the way back to that point.
Well, and not only that, but with Bathilda coming over every day, she is telling Lily all these fantastic stories about Dumbledore and things that you wouldn't believe about Dumbledore. And then that ends because, unfortunately, the last page of the letter, Harry can't find anywhere, so he doesn't really get to finish the letter. But he gets a chance to, reread it, and it really, obviously, it's, making him cry as he's reading it. Well, and
I love that they're at the point where she says something in the letter about, he's flying around the house, and he's terrorizing the cat, and he's like, I had a cat. What happened to that cat? Do you think it wandered off? Did it also get killed? It's just, it's the little things we take for granted. I assume my daughter's going to remember we have 2 cats, but who knows, right? You didn't even remember that. It's such a minor, normal thing that she just references in this letter that is almost, it just gives him such a new perspective. I never thought I had a pet. I guess I had a pet. I guess we had a cat. What happened to that cat? It's so deep.
Well, and also too, Harry thinks exactly what we would be thinking at this point. Is why in the world does Dumbledore have the invisibility cloak when we know Dumbledore doesn't need an invisibility cloak to become invisible? And so, of course, he can't. Harry has no idea because he can't ask anymore. And he's wondering what these crazy stories are about Dumbledore. Did he, fail Transfiguration? Had he take a goat charming like Aberforth? What kind of story is this? And it really means something here because, Harry's having all these doubts about Dumbledore here at the beginning of the chapter and with what he had heard. And so he would love to find the rest of this letter to kind of get the rest of this story about the things that Dumbledore may or may not have been a part of. And so it's just really interesting.
But at some point when he's kind of pondering this relationship with Dumbledore and questioning who he is and what he knows, he references something about, this wizard he's idolized. And I think that's so interesting because that's such a specific word, idolized. And it's not looked up to or admired. He literally has turned him into something that he's not, right? And I think it's such a powerful word to use to describe. And that's part of why I think Harry is struggling so much with not knowing the answers, right? Not knowing the truth, not knowing what it is, which will kind of carry on through parts of the rest of the chapter when, Hermione comes to find Harry and kind of tells him to move on from it, right? Like, why would you believe anything Rita Skeeter says, that sort of thing. It's kind of a common theme. I think it kind of even permeates the rest of the book, is what does he know and does it matter? And it's kind of this constant struggle. And I think he fights with it the most in this chapter because it's kind of the one time he has this quiet downtime and is turning to his thoughts and doesn't know what to do with them.
Yeah.
And so, as he is searching and trying to read this letter over and over again, Hermione kind of frantically starts calling for him from the other room.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Hermione is able to find him, and it had worried her and Ron because they woke up and he had just disappeared, and they're like, you cannot do that. You cannot just disappear on us. And they talk about the fact that the house has been ransacked, and so they wonder like who did it, and was it information in the order? Was it Snape? And they're like, well, I mean, he already was in the order, so and please
tell Harry he's a right foul git.
Yeah,
the whole thing. Very Ron-like.
And it's interesting too because Hermione reads the letter, and what we have this conversation with, should they go to Godric's Hollow? And Hermione knows that this is something that Harry really wants, but she's also worried that they would be the first place the Death Thieves would look, and she can't quite recognize on why it would be important to talk to Bathilda Bagshot, even though she knew the Dumbledore, she knew his parents, so
this goes back to what we talked about in the last episode, where Hermione sort of is lacking this emotional intelligence in order to comprehend, right? And here's kind of another situation where she's lacking the emotional intelligence to understand that this might not be something Harry can just rationalize away, no matter how logical her argument, like this is going to stick with him. And just sweep it under the rug isn't an option for him. And I think this is yet again another, or a continuation maybe of the same behavior we saw from her at the end of the last chapter.
Yeah. Well, and it is so interesting too, because, she mentions like, you can't allow these people to take away your memories of Dumbledore. You knew Dumbledore. And what I thought was so interesting is that what Harry wants here, and he tells it to Hermione, is he just wants the truth. And I think that's one of the things that's becomes kind of an understated theme in the sense that people don't give it enough credit. But really what Harry's whole thing is that he just wants to be told the truth. We've been able to see throughout the series that Harry can handle the truth regardless of what it is, but he just wants to know what the truth is. And I think it's really important because what we also see is how the lack of the truth has impacted these characters throughout all of these books so far, and we see how, the truth can be shaped and formed. And, we've talked so much at depth in this whole series about how, the media in the books portrays things a certain way, whereas the truth is different, and so how the truth can really set you free. And that's what we see Harry Potter really wanting. And so I think it's just really interesting that that's called out here specifically. Harry's like, I just want the truth. And it makes a difference whether we know the truth or not. What actually is, rather than just a story that somebody's telling us. And how much that can change our perspective and what we look towards in the future and all of those things. So I just liked that's like you said, it's something that Hermione just quite can't put her emotional intelligence finger on here with Harry. And they're definitely on different wavelengths again. And I think this is one of those places where Harry has more emotional intelligence than Hermione in some ways, because he's looking at not just the scientific facts, but he's looking at that deeper meaning of the truth, and it's a whole other level than Hermione just happens to be on right now.
Well, and I think to some extent, I think there's a fear, and I think it happens in our lives too, that a lot of times we're not honest about things because we're afraid of the other person's reaction, right? Yep. We need them to do, or we want them to do something for us, and we're afraid if they know the truth that will change what they choose to do. And, I think Harry is starting to kind of wonder. He asks himself at some point, was he just a tool not to be trusted and polished as a weapon against, Voldemort? He starts to wonder if he wasn't trusted well enough, or his character isn't strong enough, that he will, not do the right thing. He's, in his mind, and kind of how I'm seeing it, he's going to do the right thing regardless. He's going to go get the Horcruxes. He's going to defeat Voldemort. It doesn't matter. He knows that's the right thing to do. But at this point, he just wants the truth of Dumbledore. He wants to know who he was. He feels like he's kind of owed it or earned it, because it doesn't matter. He's going to do the right thing anyway, because he's a very altruistic character and person. And I think a lot of times we don't give the people in our lives enough credit as well, in the same way, right? We tell lies, little white lies or big lies or whatever, thinking that someone will change their mind and not do the right thing, when really people will generally do the right thing.
Yeah.
So I think it's just so interesting because we're getting into that, and I feel like Harry feels like it's a respect thing for him. He wants to know, he needs to know, he feels like he has the right to know with everything he's been through and knows he needs to go through. And, I think that's really relatable.
So what's so fascinating is that as they're going to breakfast, they pass Sirius's brother's room. And it's so interesting because Harry is finally figured out who R.A.B. is, which is crazy because we've been waiting this whole time and it's been under our noses this whole time. It's Regulus Black, which is it's insane. So, yeah,
we solved this problem, and Harry kind of puts the pieces together and tells the others, and, they spend a good deal of time searching this room, which we learn is kind of the complete opposite of Sirius's room, right? And like how Sirius is rage against the family, and Regulus is literally everything that could support the family. There is just this Slytherin vomit of decorations everywhere in this room. And even Harry, Ron and Hermione start searching, and Harry is like, well, he was a seeker. And everyone's like, yeah, we'll keep looking. They don't want to get too into it. And Harry really wants to get to know Regulus and his thought process and what it means and things. And, I think it's, again, just sort of a difference in character, right? Harry wants the motivation and to get into it. And the others are like, no, just look for what we're looking for. Don't go there. We don't need to go there. And they search for quite a while. I think they search for about an hour, and they don't find anything.
Well, and then what's so interesting is that they remember that as they were cleaning the house, that they came across a locket. So we're going all the way back to the 5th book now, and that locket, they were throwing things out, and they know that Kreacher nicked a lot of things. And so they ask Kreacher, they summon Kreacher, and they ask him about the locket. But he has this fascinating tale to tell them that, unfortunately, one, the locket is gone because it's Mundungus Fletcher who has come and ransacked the house, and he took all sorts of things, one of them being Master Regulus's locket. And they're like, what do you mean, Master Regulus's locket? And so Kreacher launches into this very exciting and disturbing tale of how Regulus, in the employ of Voldemort, needs Kreacher for a mission. And that mission was setting up where the locket was going to be in the first place.
It's this harrowing tale. It's so... It really is exactly kind of what you'd expect right? It's pretty much what they had speculated about between, I think it was Harry and Dumbledore had speculated, how did this happen? Where did it go? You know, it was kind of what he had speculated had happened when they found out the locket was fake, right? But here's kind of a confirmation and an interesting turn on something where, you know, we've seen a few times where sort of the vices of the Dark Lord have undercut him. And here's yet another time where, you know, he thinks he's created this super secure trap against wizards, particularly Dumbledore, and he overlooks the fact, and I love that Hermione calls it out, like he would never think that a house elf would have magic that he did not, and that he didn't understand, because they're so beneath him. How could it ever be different or more powerful? And that actually becomes his undoing in this case. And I love how that's called out. And I love that his downfall is legitimately his arrogance, because who doesn't hate an arrogant, just bad guy?
Yeah. And I think, the thing that's so beautiful about that is, you know, Voldemort just basically getting hoisted on his own petard, right? I mean, you know, because he thinks he's all that in a, you know, bag of crisps, as they would call it in Britain. So, and the fact that, you know, he forgot that the highest law, basically in elf magic, which is to obey your master. So their magic allows them to do all sorts of things that wizards cannot, which is basically to be able to disapparate and apparate into places other people can't, like Hogwarts or like this cave. And that's how Kreacher ends up home. And so Regulus tells him to stay hidden in the house, not to go out, so that Voldemort does not know. And then he comes back to Kreacher and tells him, we need to go back to the cave, and I need you to come with me. And of course, Kreacher knows how to get to the cave. He knows all the secrets to get through the cave. And he helps Master Regulus get the locket. But this time, he's not the one drinking the potion. Master Regulus is. And Regulus dies at the hands of the Inferi, and Kreacher returns with the locket and was told to destroy it, but he couldn't find any way to destroy it. And then, unfortunately, it's stolen by Mundungus.
It's I think even in here too, we're kind of given a little insight, right? Kreacher is very loyal. I mean, house elves will do what their masters obey, but this is particularly heart-wrenching for Kreacher because to him, Master Regulus was always kind.
Yes.
And, you know, did the right things. And so for him, it's like losing a family member or a friend who's the bad guy, you know, before he turns and does this very selfless thing. But he doesn't care about the selflessness. He just cares about the fact that his master died, right? Like his family died. And, you know, that he can't tell anyone. And we kind of learn that even after death, like a master's orders are applicable to the house elves, you know, they feel this moral obligation to continue obeying, because he can't tell his mistress, who he also loves and feels loves him, you know, and so to betray and, you know, we hear like he tells some information to Narcissa, and it's because she's also kind to him, right? And Hermione points out the fact to Harry that Sirius was always very cruel to Kreacher because of what he represented to him and his, you know, he's sort of an extension of his family and the only family left that he can really, you know, continue to rebel against. And, you know, he'd have no obligation or pity for Sirius because he showed him no kindness. And I think it takes on a whole new approach of how they're going to treat Kreacher and how they're going to interact. And it's definitely you get more flies with honey type approach. And that's instantly what Harry does is he goes, I don't want to be like Sirius. I don't want to be cruel to anybody. Even if he's sort of a mean, nasty character, I'm going to be kind to him, which is totally Harry through and through. And he you even starts this conversation with Kreacher, when you feel ready, please sit up. And gives him a second to like wipe his eyes like a toddler and wipe his nose like my toddler does and, then rejoin the conversation. And I think it's just so unique and amazing on how this goes. And I think that that's how we're going to really see some big impacts to the story moving forward. And then he kind of ends it with Harry saying, go find Mundungus Fletcher, who we found out has robbed the house, and that's where all the stuff went. And that Kreacher's super distraught because particularly he lost Master Regulus's locket, and that's how we get this whole story. And Harry says, go find him. Go find him. We need to know what happened to that locket. And then the chapter ends with this very kind act that Ron's like, dude, too far.
Yeah, I think the thing that really I loved about this is obviously what it is that Harry does for Kreacher. But I also think that one of the things that is really special about this is the way in which Hermione is able to help Harry. Like, this is a point where Hermione is actually helpful emotionally, intelligence-wise. And it's that she's able to put herself in the place of where Kreacher is and how he's thinking, because it is different than how Harry thinks, because he's not a house elf and he's not bound by the rules of the house elf, and he doesn't understand why Kreacher would do this thing to his master, but Hermione helps him see it is because you have to remember Sirius was not nice to him, and the loyalty that Kreacher feels is towards the people in the house who were kind to him, and that kindness goes a long way into changing the attitude of the character of Kreacher. And so I think it's a really good message, because obviously what it's showing us here is how do we treat those people that others may see as less than them. Do we treat them in a way that is kind and loving, or do we treat them in a way that treats them like property, basically? And that's where you rightly called out. That's that moment where, Harry doesn't want to be like that. That's a part of Sirius that he does not want in himself. And so I think there's a real beauty in that, that Harry can see that's not the way that he should be.
Well, yeah, I think there's so much to it, and there's just this idea. I mean, there's so much, and this idea that Kreacher doesn't care about wizard wards. He doesn't care about what's, right and wrong. He literally only has what his very narrow exposure to the world is, and doesn't have the same sort of like guiding sense of what's right and wrong. He just knows what he's been treated and what's been said to him and done to him, right? So he doesn't care what, Bellatrix turns around and does to somebody else, as long as she's kind to him. And this is just a thought process that Harry cannot really comprehend or relate to until, to your point, Hermione points it out to him. And I think that just taking that opportunity to stop and take a second to see what is like, put yourself in someone else's shoes for that minute is so impactful. And it's a good reminder for all of us to take a second, take a step back, try to have some compassion before you just say whatever you think and feel, right?
Yep.
And so, I mean, even if it doesn't change your perspective, even if it doesn't change what you believe, it gives you better understanding and it helps you relate and helps you understand and things like that. So I think it's such a mature thing for her to both be able to do and acknowledge and tell him to do, or kind of just gently nudge him to do.
Right.
And we don't get to see it in this chapter, but spoiler alert, it has a pretty significant impact on the next chapter or two. And so, I think it's such a amazing moment before he sort of loses his mind, because Harry has another very genuine, kind moment with Kreacher.
I loved, I really love that Harry does what he does with Kreacher. It is very funny that you get Ron being like, dude, too far. But I think what he does for Kreacher is he legitimizes who Kreacher is as a person, and he treats him like a person, right? Like it's really beautiful that the way in which like he makes sure that Kreacher knows that he is like a valuable person. And it's just, you don't see that a lot, obviously. This is this is something that wizards don't do for other, they don't do for house elves very often. And so, we've already seen Harry be very kind and compassionate towards Dobby. And the same way, he's the same way with Kreacher here. And he gives him, Master Regulus's locket. And Kreacher just, like, at that point, he just kind of loses his S, like he can't handle it, because he's not used to this type of kindness. But it's so beautiful to watch Harry give him the locket. And Harry knows what he's doing too. I mean, I don't think it's quite just altruism that Harry has in mind, but I do think that there is a really good heart that it's coming from, which is, I need to treat this character in a way that's different than everybody else has treated him, because he deserves to be treated like that. And at the same time, it's definitely going to be helpful for me if I do.
Interest.
Right.
Yeah.
It's in my own best interest to treat him like a human being, basically. And there's a real beauty in that, right? Like there is a reason for us to treat people around us with kindness and compassion, and part of that is just because it's also going to benefit us too. Like whether we like kind of realize it or not, it actually is going to be a benefit to us. So she plays all those different sides here in this whole thing. But yeah, the fact that, I mean, Harry treats Kreacher with kindness is really beautiful. And Ron kind of makes fun of it a little bit, but that's also Ron being Ron, and I think him kind of like not necessarily being in the same place to kind of see what's happening and why it's happening. But it's a great moment. I think this chapter is just full of moments where we're seeing people be good people to each other, and try to take care of each other, even though it's not always easy. I mean, Hermione is trying to take care of Harry regardless of how good she's doing the job right now sometimes. And here, yeah, we see Harry literally trying to take care of a character who nobody's taking care of. And I love it. He sends him, like, he's even thinking in his head, I want to say this nicely, but I need him to know that this is an order, basically, that cannot be disobeyed, because we need to find Mundungus Fletcher, because this is about the Horcrux at this point. It's beyond just everything else that's been going on in the house with Kreacher now. And we've got our lead. Like, this is exciting. This is so exciting. We've got our lead, and I can't wait now. Like, everything's really into high gear at this point.
Yeah, it's such a great chapter. And, I think part of why Ron can't relate is he, since the beginning, and we've said it a few times, he kind of represents the institutional wizarding perspective, right? Sometimes the knowledge he brings to the table is super useful, but it also means he's subject to like sort of the bias that has gone along with the general wizarding culture. And we've seen it in the statue at the Ministry, and we've seen it several other times when we talk about, when Harry's met the centaurs and met, Dobby, and there's a bunch of other sort of things that we've come across, even meeting the giant or Grop, he has a different perspective on all of that. And so, I think this is not Ron's moment to shine, but he kind of just quietly sits by and observes and doesn't, I think he's learning and growing, but I agree, it's such a great chapter, and it is just full of so many people just doing the right thing and being genuinely good people. And even Kreacher has moments where he decides to just kind of do the right thing. And so it's an exciting chapter and a touching chapter and kind of a sorrowful chapter, because we now know that both Regulus boys or sons died doing the right thing and fighting the Dark Lord, and neither of them will ever really get accolades for that, right? Both of them will sort of be the unsung heroes of this battle. And that's always a hard pill to swallow. So it's a lot, and it's great. And I'm so excited as we keep kind of cooking and grooving, and I think we're catching some steam now. I don't know why all my catchphrases today are from like the 1950s, but it just feels appropriate for whatever reason. And so yeah, I can't wait to see, but I think we're all gonna have to wait an extra week because, as we have said a few times, Matthew is moving. And it's just a lot. I don't know if any of you have bought a house and moved up, picked up your life. There's a lot going on. And so we're going to skip a week to allow him sort of a break and the ability to actually get moved into his new place, and not have his brain going 8,000 directions and rushing to set up his equipment and all that fun stuff. So we'll have 2 weeks to wait until we can talk more about, whether Kreacher finds Mundungus and what is going to happen from here. But until then.
Yeah, I gotta say, I think this chapter is kind of neat because there's a lot of things that we find out, and there's a lot of excitement in it now. And what's funny is that in this very chapter, Harry himself was thinking, okay, how in the world am I going to find these Horcruxes? Like, I don't even know where to begin. And now we see that it's been under his nose this whole time, and we have a lead now. And so I think that's what's really exciting is at the beginning of the chapter, again, Harry just had no thought process of how this is going to be possible. And, everything now looks completely different than it did the moment this chapter began for him. And I think that's a really cool thing. And I love how she does that, because what she did here is she worked in like 3 different books worth of things, when it came to all the stuff we had talked about with house elves back, from starting from book 4 onward, and even just honestly what we had been learning about house elves even from the second book when we first met Dobby and so, I think that's what makes this so special, is that we are really seeing Rowling pull the strings and bring it all together already. And we're on chapter 10. So to me, that's just fascinating. It's my favorite part of this book, is that everything comes together. And so, yeah, I'm so excited. I can't wait. And so, Drea, I'm excited to move, and we'll be back as soon as we can, with the next episode. But while everybody waits, if anybody wants to catch up with you and, see what's going on with you, where can they find you?
Sure. If you want to pose more incredibly difficult and life-altering questions about who I'd recast or which cat I love best in my life, you can find me on Instagram at Andrea Coffman or on Twitter at PCFChick.
And you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, Vero under the name Matt Rushing02. I am here on the network also doing Aggressive Negotiations with John Mills as we're talking about the great Star Wars saga each and every week, just picking out a fun topic from that and having a great old time as we discuss it. You can also find me on the Track FM network. I am actually doing, as you hear this, I'm about to be getting back into another show over there that I started way back in the day. It's been a long time since I've been on it, but I'll be back on Literary Trek, so you can catch me there. I got tons of old episodes, and of course I'm doing our General Geek show, the 602 Club, where you can find us talking about all of the fandoms that we love, not just one. And, of course, doing the Orb, when Chris Jones and I get a chance, we talk about Star Trek Deep Space Nine. But thank you so much, as always, for checking that outpost.
Mischief managed.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.